My name is Marigold Parker, 28 years old, born and raised in a small town in Ohio. I once thought my life would turn brighter when I married Ethan Caldwell, the son of a wealthy family living in a grand mansion on the outskirts of Dallas. But I was wrong, painfully wrong. From the very first days in the Caldwell house, I felt like an outsider. My mother-in-law, Margaret Caldwell, a woman in her 50s, always wore a stern face and had a scrutinizing gaze. My sister-in-law, Olivia, then 24, constantly mocked me with half-joking remarks. They never truly accepted me, but as long as I still had Ethan's love, I believed I could endure it all. Then that fateful day arrived. Ethan and I sat in Dr. Anderson's office. On the polished wooden desk lay the test results I never wanted to see. "I'm sorry, Marigold," the doctor said gently, though each word cut into my heart like a knife. "Your chances of conceiving are very low. Not impossible, but extremely difficult." I looked at Ethan, my trembling hand gripping his, but he never squeezed back. His eyes were cold, as if staring right through me. The ticking of the clock in the room echoed sharply. In that moment, I knew my happiness was crumbling. When we returned to the mansion, I could barely breathe as I saw Margaret and Olivia waiting in the living room. "What's the result?" Margaret's voice was sharp as a razor. Ethan loosened his tie, poured himself a glass of whiskey, then uttered 4 icy words. "She has a problem." I froze. In his eyes, I had become nothing more than a broken object. Margaret smirked, her eyes flashing with disappointment. "I've always said this. A woman who can't bear children has no value. A tree that bears no fruit is just a burden." Those words pierced my chest. Olivia, sipping her tea with satisfaction, added mockingly, "I'm sure within 6 months of my marriage I'll have a baby. Being a mother is a woman's duty. It's not that hard." I forced myself to stay calm, answering softly, "We'll try other treatments. Medicine is very advanced now." But Margaret had already turned away, indifferent, as if the conversation was over. The following months were filled with treatments: hormone injections, egg retrieval, countless medications. Yet every attempt ended in failure. Each disappointment pushed Ethan further away. He no longer accompanied me to the clinic. He always had an excuse: meetings, business trips. At night, lying next to each other, we had nothing left to say. 15 months passed in a cycle of hope and despair. I cried silently in the bathroom, tearing up negative pregnancy tests and burying them at the bottom of the trash. But I couldn't hide from my mother-in-law's increasingly scornful looks. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I stepped into Ethan's study and found divorce papers on his desk. My hands turned cold as I picked them up. Attached was the prenuptial agreement I had signed 3 years earlier, when I was 25, naive enough to believe love could conquer everything. Every clause was highlighted. If we divorced, I would walk away with nothing. I trembled as I asked, "How long have you been planning this, Ethan?" He looked at me without a shred of guilt. "Marigold, we both know this can't go on. I want a family that can actually exist." At that moment, Margaret appeared in the doorway, her lips curling in a victorious smile. "Marigold, it's best you pack tonight. Olivia will call a cab for you. I think that's easier for everyone." I looked to Ethan, hoping he would stop her, say something in my defense. But he only lowered his head, gathering papers into his briefcase, silent, as if I had never been his wife. That night, under Margaret's cold supervision, I packed everything I could into one small suitcase. 3 years of marriage reduced to a few clothes and shattered memories. I carefully folded my white wedding dress into thin paper, as if burying a dead dream. Margaret stood at the door, handing me a $20 bill and 3 singles, $23 in total. "This is for the cab. Consider it my last act of kindness. You'll understand one day. A woman who can't give her husband children can never keep a family. Ethan deserves better." I clutched the suitcase handle, feeling the world collapse around me. But the moment the door closed behind me, a fierce fire ignited inside. They thought they had erased me, but at that very moment they had planted the seed of my rebirth. The taxi carried me away from the Caldwell mansion in the pouring rain. I hugged the small suitcase to my chest, the $23 in my pocket a cruel joke. The driver asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I stared through the rain-streaked window at the bright but foreign Dallas skyline. I had no home, no place to go. My voice cracked. "Take me to the cheapest motel nearby." An hour later, I curled up in a dingy motel room that reeked of dampness and cigarette smoke. I once thought my life had ended at 28. But in that dark, suffocating room, I made myself a promise. Marigold, you will not drown here. One day you'll hold your head high again. In the days that followed, I went all over the city looking for work. No notable degree, no experience besides the title of Ethan Caldwell's wife. I applied at a small laundromat in a working-class neighborhood. The owner, Mrs. Gomez, looked me up and down, her voice raspy. Have you ever done this kind of work before? I gritted my teeth and lied. Yes, I'm used to it. She gave a short huff, then handed me a worn-out apron. $6 an hour, cash pay. Start now. And so, from a daughter-in-law living in a mansion, I became a laundry worker, surrounded daily by bleach fumes and scorching irons. At night, I cleaned offices to earn extra wages. Some days, my hands bled from detergent, but I bit my lip, refusing to collapse. One evening after my shift, I wandered into a second-hand bookstore called Maple Ink and asked if I could help organize shelves. The owner, Harold, a gentleman in his 70s, nodded kindly. I can't pay much, but if you love books, this place will feel peaceful. That little shop became my refuge. Among the pages of books, I found hope that a new day was still waiting for me. But the meager pay from laundry and the bookstore wasn't enough for rent. I had to keep the night cleaning job too. Sometimes I fell asleep right on a wooden desk at the bookstore, the edge of a book imprinted on my cheek. Harold would quietly leave a granola bar and a cup of coffee beside me. Those small acts of kindness kept me going. My life took a turn on an ordinary morning. That day, I rushed into a diner to clean a coffee spill on my shirt. When I looked up, I froze. Sitting at the last table was a man with silver at his temples but bright, familiar eyes. He looked up, caught my gaze, and laughed. Marigold Parker? Is that you? I blinked, then realized. Daniel Ingwin, the boy who used to live across the street in our small Ohio town. We had played together as kids, then lost touch when he moved to Texas for college. Now, in his early 40s, he carried himself with confidence, dressed in a sharp suit. Oh my God, Daniel. I stammered. I can't believe it's you. We sat down, and the conversation flowed as if no time had passed. Daniel was now the owner of a mid-sized logistics company headquartered right here in Dallas. When he heard I was juggling odd jobs just to get by, his eyes turned serious. I need an operations manager. It's not an easy role, but I remember how meticulous and hardworking you were as a kid. I believe you can learn quickly. I gave a bitter laugh. Daniel, I only know how to wash clothes, clean floors, and shelf books. Logistics sounds like another world. He looked straight into my eyes, firm. Marigold, you're smarter than you think. Come to the office on Monday. Give yourself a chance. I held his business card in my hand, my heart tangled. Could a woman abandoned by her husband, living in a cheap motel, really handle such a job? Yet Daniel's voice of conviction sparked a fragile hope inside me. That weekend, I buried myself in books about management, logistics, and organizational skills that Harold recommended. I hand-copied concepts, studying until I forgot to eat or sleep. In my heart, a fire to reclaim my worth burned brighter. On Monday, I walked into Ngwin Logistics wearing my cleanest, though worn, office outfit. 3 young employees eyed me skeptically. Daniel smiled and introduced me. This is Marigold, she'll help us improve our operations. I shook each of their hands, my heart pounding but my eyes steady with resolve. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work with everything I had. I reorganized files, built tracking boards, spotted flaws in the delivery system. Each time I discovered a way to cut costs or speed up processing, my heart leapt. I was no longer the fruitless tree Margaret had mocked. I was someone who could create value with intelligence and persistence. 3 months later, Daniel called me into his office. He set an envelope before me. I opened it, stunned by the number. My salary had doubled compared to all my previous jobs combined. You've done more than I expected, Marigold. Thank you for not giving up. I left his office with trembling hands, but inside me swelled a fierce belief. From zero, I had begun rewriting my life. And this was only the beginning. The job at Ingwin Logistics gave me my first real chance to prove myself. After a year, the company grew rapidly thanks to the improvements I had suggested. Daniel trusted me and often let me handle major clients directly. For the first time, I had real savings. But I knew working for a paycheck wasn't enough. I had to learn how to make money work for me. One afternoon in the company cafeteria, I overheard colleagues talking about stocks. They laughed about making a few $1,000s in just a month from numbers on their phones. That very evening, I bought a book on personal finance and signed up for an online investing course. I scribbled down every term, every chart like a student stepping into a new world for the first time. At first, I only dared to put $100 into an index fund. Every day watching the phone app, my nerves felt like I was gambling. But slowly, I learned to analyze, to understand that the market wasn't just red or green. It was a whole language of human psychology and the movements of the economy. I gradually increased my investments, patient like a farmer planting seeds and waiting for harvest. The first big opportunity came when I read about a new medical tech company in Boston working on fertility support solutions. That struck right at the old wound in my heart. I had once been despised for my infertility, and now here was a chance to contribute to technology that could help thousands of women. After many nights studying financial reports, I boldly put nearly $40,000 of my savings into the company's stock. Friends said I was crazy, colleagues shook their heads, but I trusted my instincts. 6 months later, the company announced successful trials and signed a contract with a major hospital. The stock price quadrupled. I officially became the first dollar millionaire in the Parker family, something even I could hardly believe. That money opened a new door for me. I didn't spend recklessly. I bought a small apartment in downtown Dallas, the first real home I'd had after years of instability. Most of the rest I reinvested. I dove into clean tech startups, from renewable energy to management software. There were failures, times I lost tens of thousands, but also moments where profits tripled or quadrupled. One of my boldest moves was investing $400,000 to buy shares of a small private airline in Houston. That gave me rights to use their private jets for a few trips each year. I remember crying the day I signed the contract, not because of the money but because the woman once thrown out on the street with $23, was now signing papers to own part of the sky. Success led to more success. I was soon invited to speak at personal finance conferences. That was when I realized, beyond making money for myself, I could help other women understand and take control of their finances. I started a blog, then founded a small consulting firm called Parker Strategic Consulting. At first, my clients were just a few friends in the industry. But thanks to real results, the firm quickly gained a reputation, especially among women entrepreneurs. I didn't just teach them how to invest. I guided them on negotiation, business strategy, and most importantly, how to rise after failure. Some nights, I sat alone in my high-rise office, looking down at the glowing city, my heart trembling. I remembered standing outside the Caldwell mansion with nothing but a suitcase. I remembered Margaret's cruel words, "A woman who can't bear children has no value." Now I smiled. My worth was never in my womb or my bloodline. It was in my willpower and intelligence. Sometimes I wondered, if Ethan hadn't divorced me, if Margaret hadn't driven me out, would I have become who I am today? Probably not. They pushed me into an abyss, but it was from there that I learned to grow wings. When my assets crossed $2 million, I bought a sleek office in Dallas's business district. On the glass door, the name Parker Strategic Consulting gleamed. I stood there, emotions swelling. This wasn't just a company. This was my declaration, that I had survived, risen, and would go even further. Yet I still didn't know that life had another surprise waiting for me. One that would forever change the way I understood happiness. When Parker Strategic Consulting began to stabilize, I realized something was missing. I had a career, money, and respect. But every night I returned to a luxury apartment only to face 4 cold walls. Loneliness gnawed at me no matter how much I tried to cover it with the glow of success. One weekend morning, I happened to pass by a small cafe called Willow's Brew, tucked on a corner of Dallas's Old Town. Its glass windows were hung with dried flowers, old wooden tables filled the space, and the soft aroma of roasted coffee drifted out. I didn't know why I stepped inside. Maybe I just wanted a little peace away from tense meetings. The owner, Mrs. Harris, around 60 with snow-white hair, looked at me and smiled. "You look tired. We always need an extra hand here on weekends. Want to give it a try?" I laughed. A millionaire businesswoman working part-time in a cafe? Sounded absurd. But I nodded. I needed a place where no one knew who I was, no one judged me by financial reports. On weekends after that, I learned how to brew coffee, wipe tables, and serve pastries. I fumbled, sometimes spilled drinks, even got complaints, but the feeling was strange. I felt real, no longer hidden behind a polished business suit. It was at Willow's Brew that I met Caleb Morgan. He was about 34, always sitting at the table by the window, reading thick books and ordering only one thing: black coffee, no sugar. Caleb was tall and lean, with deep brown eyes and a calm way of speaking. I noticed he always carried color-printed documents with the logo of a community support center. One time when I accidentally served the wrong order, Caleb simply smiled kindly. "No worries, I'm not in a rush. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes." That gentle remark warmed me. It was so different from the biting mockery I had endured from my former in-laws. In the weeks that followed, we began talking more. I learned he was a social worker at a center for children in difficult circumstances. He spoke about abandoned kids, about helping them find new homes. When he talked about his work, Caleb's eyes lit up with sincerity so strong that I could only sit quietly and listen. One late afternoon, when the cafe was quiet, he asked, "You always smile at the customers, but I see sadness in your eyes. Are you carrying something heavy inside?" I froze for a moment. No one had ever seen through me like that. After a few seconds of silence, I softly replied, "Maybe just some scars from the past." He didn't press further, only nodded. "I understand. Everyone carries their own burdens. But what matters is that we're still moving forward." Those words echoed in me all night. From that day on, I found myself looking forward to weekends at Willow's Brew, just to sit with Caleb for a few minutes. We gradually grew closer. He took me to visit the center where he worked. I saw orphans burst into laughter when Caleb arrived. The way they hugged him, trusted him, melted my heart. In those children's eyes, Caleb wasn't just a worker. He was an anchor. One autumn evening, with golden leaves scattered across the sidewalk, I told him my whole story. The broken marriage, the humiliation of being thrown out of my in-laws' house, the journey of starting over with $23. I thought he would pity me or look at me with the same curiosity as everyone else. But Caleb only held my hand, his gaze steady. "Marigold, you're not weak. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known. And you deserve happiness. Not because of wealth, not because of status, but simply because of who you are." For the first time in years, I cried in front of a man. But those weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of release. Our love came slowly, quietly, but steadily. Caleb never cared how much money I had or how big my company was. He preferred cooking simple dinners with me in his small apartment over dining in luxury restaurants. When I once mentioned prenup agreements from my past, Caleb only smiled. "To me, marriage is about carrying life together. I don't need any papers to prove that." A year later, we had a simple wedding at the Dallas City Hall. I wore a cream dress from a local boutique and Caleb wore an old but neat suit. Our witness was none other than Mrs. Harris, the cafe owner where we first met. She cried as she signed the marriage license, saying, "You two are proof that real love still exists, even after faith has been broken." We walked out of City Hall hand in hand, with no sparkling diamond rings, no lavish banquet, but with hearts light and full. I knew this time I had found the man who loved me for me, not for family expectations, not for money, not for any other condition. And I didn't know then that this marriage would bring me a miracle I once thought impossible. One winter morning, as pale sunlight streamed through the window of our small apartment, I suddenly felt dizzy. At first, I thought it was just from staying up late working, but the feeling repeated for days. Caleb grew worried and begged me to see a doctor. I sat in the clinic, my heart pounding like a drum as the doctor held the test results. "Congratulations, Marigold," she smiled. "You're pregnant." I froze, my mind blank. In that instant, I remembered all the failed pregnancy tests, the cruel words of my ex-mother-in-law. "A tree that bears no fruit will never have value." That curse had seemed carved into my flesh. And now I was breaking it. When I handed Caleb the results, he stood stunned for a few seconds, then pulled me into his arms, eyes wet. "Really? Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I nodded, tears falling uncontrollably. We held each other tightly, saying nothing more. All the joy, pain, and hope of years spilled over in that moment. Throughout the pregnancy, Caleb was by my side every step. He learned to cook healthy meals, clumsily preparing dinner for me. He read books on maternity, sticking notes around the apartment that said, "Drink milk, rest." Never in my life had I felt so cherished. 9 months later, in the bright white room of a Dallas hospital, I heard the first cry of my baby. The tiny child lay on my chest, his little hand gripping my finger so tightly my heart ached with happiness. "It's a boy," the doctor said. I looked at Caleb and whispered, "Our son." He nodded, tears running down his cheeks. "Our son." We named our son Elliot Morgan Parker, carrying both family names as a perfect blend of love. Elliot was a miracle, the answer to all those years I had been deemed useless. The first weeks of motherhood were exhausting. I managed my company while learning how to rock him to sleep, change diapers, and stay awake all night when he had a fever. Some days so tired I sat crying in the living room, doubting my strength. But every time I saw Caleb's loving eyes and Elliot's innocent smile, I pulled myself back up. On Elliot's 6-month birthday, I sat in the rocking chair, holding him in my arms. Golden sunlight filled the room. I whispered softly, "Do you know, Elliot, you are the answer to everything. You prove that your mama is not lacking, not useless." The baby babbled nonsense, yet his tiny hand gripped my shirt tightly as if he understood all I meant. From the day Elliot was born, I was no longer haunted by cruel old words. I didn't need to prove anything to Margaret or Ethan. His very existence was proof enough. I wasn't a barren tree, I was a whole mother. Once, while carrying Elliot through the park, I heard laughter from a nearby family. A woman in an expensive dress posed proudly with her child. For a fleeting moment, I remembered my ex-mother-in-law's disdainful look as she handed me $23. I smiled softly, this time without pain. Instead, peace filled me. I already had everything. My company continued to grow, but my life no longer revolved only around investments. I rebalanced, carving out time for family. Every night before bed, Caleb kissed my forehead and Elliot's, whispering, "You two are the greatest miracle of my life." One time I asked, "Do you regret marrying someone once labeled incomplete?" He laughed, pulling me closer. "Without those scars, you wouldn't be the marigold you are today. And I would never have met the woman who made me believe real love exists." Those words etched deep into my heart. Elliot grew day by day, his laughter filling our small apartment. I realized happiness didn't come from lavish parties or grand mansions. Happiness was the first time my son looked at me and said, "Mama." Happiness was sitting with Caleb, watching our child sleep peacefully. I once thought life had ended that night I was cast out of the Caldwell mansion with only $23 in hand. But that night opened the path to where I am now. A home, a loving husband, and a miraculous child. Elliot was not just my miracle. He was also a silent yet resounding answer to the past. And I knew this was only the beginning of the next chapter. A chapter where I would face the very people who once despised me, but this time, I would return in a completely different light. One spring morning, when Elliot was nearly 2 and running around the living room, I opened my company email. The subject line made me stop breathing. Invitation. Women in Leadership Gala, honorary guest list. The sender, Olivia Caldwell. I had to read it several times to believe it. Olivia, my former sister-in-law, was now co-chair of a women's business association, hosting the annual event at the Caldwell Mansion. The message read, "We are honored to invite Mrs. Marigold Parker, CEO of Parker Strategic Consulting, to attend as an honorary guest." I chuckled. Clearly, Olivia hadn't realized the familiar name Parker was mine. That evening I told Caleb. He set Elliot on a pillow, then turned to me. "You don't have to go, Marigold. I'm afraid they'll hurt you again." I shook my head, my eyes firm. "No, this time is different. I'm not that girl anymore. I want them to see the truth." We decided to attend together as a family. Not for revenge, but to show that I had survived, found happiness, and succeeded. The week before the gala, I prepared carefully. A deep blue silk gown from a local designer made me look both elegant and strong. Caleb chose a sleek black suit, while Elliot wore a tiny suit that made him look like a little gentleman. I also booked a private jet, one of the perks from an earlier investment. I knew that stepping off that plane would be a statement without words. On gala night, a limousine carried us from the airport straight to the Caldwell gates. Flashbulbs burst as we stepped out. I held Caleb's hand, Elliot resting calmly in his father's arms. Cameras clicked rapidly, reporters whispered, asking who this woman was. I only smiled, striding confidently up the very steps where I had once been cast out in disgrace. When the grand doors opened, memories rushed over me like a wave. I had once left this place with only a small suitcase and $23. Today I returned with my family, my career, and a place no one could deny. In the great hall my eyes met Ethan's. He looked the same save for a few gray strands. His wine glass froze midair when he recognized me. His face drained of color, hand trembling until a few drops spilled onto the floor. He stammered, "Marigold?" I nodded slightly, my voice calm. "Hello, Ethan. It's been a long time." His gaze shifted instantly to Elliot, the child tugging at Caleb's tie. Shock was plain in his eyes. At that moment, Margaret Caldwell stepped forward, her face older, but her stare still sharp. She froze when she saw me, her lips quivering. Is that you?" I smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I came at Olivia's invitation." Olivia appeared just then, her expression stunned before turning crimson as she realized the truth. She herself had brought me back into this house under the title of honored guest. The air seemed frozen. Only Elliot's laughter rang out, his little hand pointing at the glittering chandelier above, breaking the heavy silence. Caleb gently introduced, "This is Elliot, our son." I looked Margaret straight in the eye, my voice soft but firm. "Ma'am, the fruitless tree you once scorned has blossomed now." Margaret staggered and Olivia dropped her glass, crimson liquid spreading across the marble floor. Around us, guests began to whisper, unsure of what was unfolding but sensing its weight. I didn't need bitter words. My presence there with my husband and son was the strongest answer of all. I hadn't come back to demand justice, but to prove that true happiness cannot be stolen. We stayed at the gala just long enough to speak with other guests, sharing about our work supporting women entrepreneurs. I saw Ethan's eyes follow me quietly, filled with regret. But I didn't care. He was nothing more than a shadow of the past. 2 hours later we left the mansion. Elliot slept soundly in Caleb's arms, his small face serene. Sitting in the limousine, I watched the house fade through the window. To my surprise, I felt light. No hatred, no torment. Just closure. When the plane lifted off, the lights of Dallas twinkling below, Caleb held my hand. "How do you feel?" I smiled, whispering, "Like I've finally put down a heavy suitcase I carried for years. Last I'm free." He kissed my forehead. I knew from then on we would never look back. True happiness was already in my arms. My little family. After that night I realized something vital. I had closed the past. No resentment bound me anymore, no craving to prove anything. But another question stirred inside. What would I do with the rest of my life? The answer came unexpectedly one morning. I read an article about divorced women, abandoned with no money, no support, exactly where I once had been. Some were drowning in debt, raising children alone, some lost everything to prenuptial agreements. I looked at Elliot stacking blocks beside me and remembered those nights curled up in a cheap motel room with $23 in my pocket. If I hadn't met Daniel, if I hadn't been given a chance, I might have broken. That night I shared my thoughts with Caleb. He listened intently, then took my hand. "You turned your pain into strength for yourself. If you want to turn it into strength for other women, I'll stand with you." And so the Phoenix Foundation was born, named after the phoenix, the bird that rises from ashes. I wanted every woman who walked into this place to feel she could begin again, stronger and more beautiful after loss. We rented a small office in downtown Dallas with a few wooden desks, a whiteboard, and an old bookshelf. Caleb took charge of counseling and support groups, while I handled financial training and entrepreneurship skills. At first, only 3 women came, their eyes wary. But after a few sessions, hope began to spark. One of the first was Linda, 36, newly divorced after 10 years at home raising children. She came to us with her 2 kids, her face filled with despair. "I have nothing left. I don't know where to start." I smiled, remembering myself years ago. "You start today, and we will walk with you." Just 6 months later, Linda had opened a small bakery, earning a steady income, and more importantly, she had regained her confidence. News of the Phoenix Foundation spread quickly. We launched classes on personal finance management, job application training, even sessions on legal rights during divorce. Gradually, from the first 3 women, we began helping hundreds. Some became bank employees, others opened hair salons, some returned to college to finish their unfinished dreams. Each time I saw their bright smiles, It felt like I was healing the old version of myself. The girl once thrown out with only a small suitcase. The Phoenix Foundation also became Elliot's second home. He toddled around the classrooms, adored by everyone as the Phoenix baby. Caleb often held him during group sessions while I taught classes and kept an eye on my little boy stacking blocks in the corner. That family atmosphere made anyone who entered feel warm. One day, while reviewing applications, I froze at a familiar name, Rachel Caldwell, Ethan's distant niece. She wrote that she had just divorced, lost everything financially, and was raising 2 young children. I stayed silent for a moment, then handed the file to Caleb. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I answered firmly, "Help her. Her children need a strong mother. We won't let the past interfere." Rachel became one of our best students. She never knew I was once her sister-in-law, and I never mentioned it. To me, it was far more important to see her rise again than to revive old grudges. When Elliot turned 4, we celebrated the Phoenix Foundation's 3rd anniversary. Over 200 women we had supported returned, bringing their success stories. I stood on stage looking out at the packed hall, tears shimmering in my eyes. I said, "I was once considered worthless because I couldn't bear a child for a man. But today I want to tell every woman here, our worth does not lie in fulfilling someone else's expectations. It lies in living true to ourselves, loving ourselves, and helping others." Thunderous applause filled the hall. Caleb carried Elliot onto the stage, and my little boy raised his tiny hands high as if adding to the moment. That night, after the guests had gone, I sat on the porch with Caleb. He asked softly, "Do you ever regret all that's happened?" I looked up at the starry sky and answered, "No. Without those dark days, I would never have known how strong I could be. And I wouldn't have you, Elliot, or the Phoenix Foundation today." He held me close, whispering, "You've turned pain into light for so many people. That's what I admire most about you." I smiled, closed my eyes, and felt peace. My life, once cast aside, had become a source of hope for hundreds of women. And I knew this journey was only beginning. From a woman abandoned with nothing but a suitcase and $23, Marigold rose from the ashes, built her career, found true love, and embraced a miracle named Elliot. Her story is not just a silent path of redemption, but proof that a woman's worth is not defined by whether she can bear children for someone. It is defined by the courage to live authentically, to turn pain into strength, and to spread hope to others who share the struggle. This is also a message for today. Every wound can be transformed into light. What do you think of Marigold's journey of resilience and her little family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch more stories of life, love, and the strength of ordinary people overcoming hardships.